Happening now, protesters are occupying the Trump Tower lobby in Manhattan, calling on the release of detained Columbia University grad student Mahmoud Khalil. Members of Jewish Voice for Peace rallied together in support of Khalil, who was arrested by ICE last weekend. He was targeted by agents after leading protests at Columbia last year over the war in Gaza. Khalil's arrest has sparked heated protests in New York City and across the nation. The grad student acted as a spokesperson for Columbia pro-Palestine protesters, but has not been charged with a crime.
It's time for Democrats to fish or cut bait. We have 2 days until government funding expires. And Democrats need to decide if they're going to support funding legislation that came over from the House or if they're going to shut down the government. So far, it's looking like they plan to shut it down.
What will Senate Democrats do? That's the question being asked across Capitol Hill today, and the answer will likely determine whether the government shuts down tomorrow. The Senate is set to take up a Republican-led plan that funds the government through September, but Republicans need Democratic votes to move the plan forward, and so far, Democrats are refusing to budge. Joining us to discuss this and more, Alex Gangitano, White House reporter here at the Hill. This Republican plan largely keeps spending levels as they were last year. Probably not the best way to run a government, but Democrats have supported these type of plans in the past. What's their beef?
So Democrats are basically saying that this CR, continuing resolution and funding bill, will give more power to Trump and to Elon Musk to do more of their cutting of government waste, to do more of taking jobs away from federal workers. We've heard from liberals who are really against this bill, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, who said that veterans could lose jobs if this CR goes through. So basically that it allows more power to the Republicans, especially just the show of faith of if Democrats are willing to sign on to something Republicans are doing, does that show that they're supporting a lot of this agenda, and a lot of what Republicans are doing, not just this one bill. So Democrats have really been agonizing over what to do this week. Do we support the bill and avoid a government shutdown, or, as centrists say, is necessary? A government shutdown, it should be considered the worst case scenario, but liberals and activists are saying don't support anything Republicans want.
Democrats, of course, do have the power to withhold their votes. That would likely end up in a shutdown. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent weighed in on this as he talked about threats to the economy. Let's take a listen.
Well, look, I'm less concerned about the short term. I think we've had a big unwind, and the tariffs, we've got strategic industries we've got to have. We want to protect the American worker, that a lot of these trade deals haven't been fair. But I can tell you what's not good for the economy is this government shutdown.
Seems like there's a risk that Democrats would be taking if they shut down the government. Part of their argument against the Trump administration is that government is important and they're slashing all these agencies. That will be painful for them to then go and allow the government to be shut down. Seems counterintuitive.
That's right. When there's already federal workers that are losing their jobs, are we going to put all of them under this shutdown scenario if they were to allow that? I think what you're seeing is really a messaging battle here. The White House, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent came out and said Trump's not causing a potential future recession with these tariffs. It's Democrats that are causing the issue with the shutdown threat. And meanwhile, Democrats are saying all of these Trump policies are wrong. You're taking jobs away from federal workers. You're putting in these tariffs that could cause a recession. The government shutdown is our way to make our voices heard. So it also comes down to who the public blames for a shutdown. The history will obviously show, and in the past it comes down to sometimes it's the president's fault of a shutdown, regardless of which party voted one way or another. But in this case, with a Republican majority, it's already passed in the House. Republicans in the White House have a pretty strong argument to blame Democrats for this if it were to happen.
Shutdown could also take the focus away from the tariffs and the damage that they say that's doing to the economy. Democrats say they want to be able to offer up some amendments to the Republican plan, including this 30-day CR option. Let's take a listen to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. Our caucus is unified on a clean April 11th CR that will keep the government open and give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass.
little bit of a political theater going on here. Democrats don't have support for their 30-day plan either. If Majority Leader Thune gives the Democrats a chance to vote on their amendments, are the Democrats going to cave and allow Republicans to pass their plan? And what would actually be the point of all that?
Right. I think Democrats now would take the win of you allowing us to vote on this amendment. Thune actually said today that he'd be open to giving Democrats the amendment vote, but in return, he would want them to then support the CR, let it pass, avoid a government shutdown. So it's definitely we'll give you this inch if you allow us to take our win. And I think a lot of this political theater is also because Democrats are in the minority here in Washington, and it's really Schumer and the Senate Democrats who have any kind of leverage here because they are needed on a vote here versus, House Democrats don't have as much power. So I think he's trying to use that as much as he can and be able to have a voice. But as you mentioned, not much would change with a vote like that. The Democrats don't have the vote. And if Thune's saying, okay, I'll give you this, but you have to give me the avoiding a government shutdown, well, are Democrats going to agree to that?
I don't know if that's an inch. That's more like a centimeter or a
Right.
millimeter or really nothing at all. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, is going to meet with the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, today amid this ongoing trade war with Canada. Ford has been threatening to put a surcharge on electricity coming from Canada into the U.S. Trump has been talking about ramping up steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada. There's been boycotts of U.S. goods in Canada. That movement spreading across the country. This meeting was supposed to be an olive branch to Canada, but just yesterday, Lutnick started talking about this idea of having Canada become the 51st state again. Seems like that's not a great olive branch. What do we know about this meeting?
Yeah, so this meeting comes after it was on Tuesday when Lutnick and Ford had a conversation as Trump was threatening expanding the tariffs, escalating this trade war after Ford had said, the three states that rely on us for electricity, I'm going to put a surcharge on them. The White House said we don't even have a backup plan. We just expect Canada to cut it out. And it was actually Lutnick who was able to have a conversation and things de-escalated slightly. We think that in that meeting today, it's going to be more conversations about de-escalation. But as you mentioned, him then saying, we also want you to be the 51st state, by the way, doesn't really help with de-escalation measures, according to Canadian officials who are saying, you're just mocking us with this and this will never happen. So we'll see if, the Trump administration's ongoing rhetoric that they want Canada to be part of the United States could hinder these conversations when we're in this situation that Canada has some leverage if they want to put surcharges like this on because they don't like that Trump, is picking on goods from Canada. They're also boycotting our goods. How could that impact the economy here in the U.S.? But Lutnick's, I think, ongoing argument is basically if we become one, if Canada joins in, then our economies will mix and this will all be a moot point. So it's an interesting argument there, and I don't think Ford will take it very well, but we'll see what comes out of it.
And you would think it's also making it difficult for the Canadians to negotiate with the Americans when their public is so angry about all this 51st state talk. But we'll leave it at that. Alex Gangitano, thanks so much.
Thank you.
House Democrats are on day 2 of their 3-day policy retreat about an hour outside of Washington, D.C. It comes as the congressional minority appears to be split on how to counter President Trump and his agenda in Congress. NewsNation's Jackie Koppell is in Leesburg, Virginia, covering the retreat and joins us now. Jackie, thanks so much for coming on. What's the mood there? Any infighting? Are they in panic mode?
I wouldn't necessarily say panic mode, but it's no secret that the Democrats have struggled tremendously with their message. And so what they're trying to figure out is what is that message and how do they push back on Donald Trump? You're hearing a lot about Trump, the actions that have been taken, the firing of federal workers, the cuts to programs, DOGE, but again, really working to coalesce around a message and a strategy going forward.
Between the Republican majority and Trump's White House, there's a lot to focus on. Some Democrats seem to be prioritizing the economy. Let's take a listen.
lowering the cost of living and creating opportunities for everybody, not just for the wealthy and the well-to-do, the well-off and the well-connected, but for everyday Americans. I think that was the mandate, if there is such a thing as a mandate from this past election. We've listened, we're united, and we know that Trump has failed in that effort.
Trump has historically been more trusted on economic issues, Jackie. Are Democrats trying to take that and make that their main issue?
Absolutely. They are focusing on the economy, on the cost of living. They're focused in particular on Medicaid. They're on Tuesday going to have actions in support of Medicaid around the country. It's a day of action for the Democrats. So they're really honing in on that, making sure that there are no cuts to social programs like Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. You're also hearing a lot about housing and affordable housing and their concerns over housing and urban development, that agency, and cuts that are being made to that agency, as well as education and the concerns around what that means for students in America. Many of the members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus who had a press conference earlier talked about how they are the product of American, U.S. schools and the school system and the Department of Education and what that has given them, saying essentially that that's the reason that they're congressional members now.
There's been some public disagreement over the strategy moving forward. Any indications on what the Democrats are going to do as they look to take back the House in the midterms?
Well, right now they're asking, as they say, the hard questions. They're wondering what they should do, they should move forward. They are hearing from, essentially Democratic figures to see what they should do. One of the messages I was told from Representative Liccardo out of California that he's hearing is that Democrats have to focus their message, that they can't just attack all things all the time. So I think what you're going to see is a real focusing on, as I mentioned earlier, Medicaid and saving the Medicaid and other social programs, as well as the cost of living. And one member even asking, take a look back 50 days. Are you better off now than you were before? Which is a similar message that Republicans asked Americans when the presidential election was taking place. Remember, Trump would ask, well, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Democrats are trying to turn the tables and ask that very question these days.
All right, Jackie Koppell, thank you.
Thank you.
Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says he will not run for Senate in Michigan, putting an end to months of speculation. The former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, passed on the opportunity to run for the seat held by retiring Senator Gary Peters. Previous polling showed that Buttigieg would have a strong standing in a Democratic primary. Buttigieg posted on X, "I remain enthusiastic about helping candidates who share our values and understand that in this moment, leadership means not only opposing today's cruel chaos, but also presenting a vision of a better alternative." The move opens up a possible presidential run for Buttigieg in 2028. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.